It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. From Fantatrax TV, this is Good Morning Tatooine!
Good morning, Tatooine indeed. Back once again for your weekly recap on everything Star Wars that's happened this past week, courtesy of Fantatrax.com. I'm your host, Brian Cameron, and let's see what we've got in store for the show today. First up, we're going to be discussing Ming-Na Wen talking about the Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett and how they're quite similar. Next, we'll be talking Tempest Runner, the audio drama coming out 31st of August. Then Seth Green will be discuss Star Wars Detours this past week in the state that it's currently at. Gentle Giant have revealed the new Premier Guild for 21-22. We'll have a look at what's in store there. Then the blurb came out for Star Wars The High Republic Edge of Balance. We'll be looking ahead to that latest release in the High Republic series. And lastly, Star Wars Visions. We got our first sneak peek from the Anime Expo just yesterday, so excited to see more of that. And last but not least, we'll head over to Jabba's Court for the weekly discussion, and this week we're talking The Bad Batch Episode 10, Common Ground. As always, you guys are the most important part of the show, so subscribe, ring the bell if you're on YouTube, on Facebook, hit like, follow us, of course. Share it so more people can discover it, and most importantly, comment. Your comments are a huge part of the show. Want you guys to take part and join in, and we'll try and include you guys in as much of the discussion as possible. And joining me this week from Making Tracks, it's Mark Mulcaster. How are you, Mark?
Hello, yeah, I'm good, Brian. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. And you'll have another episode of Making Tracks coming up this week, which everyone can find on their podcast of choice. Just search for Fantatrax Radio. What have you got in store for us?
So, funnily enough, this week we talk about Star Wars Visions, because that literally dropped just as we were going to record this morning. And we're going to talk about The Bad Batch and some other stuff that you'll have to download and listen to the podcast to find out.
Exciting stuff there.
Oh, it's a tease.
It is. There's lots of news to get stuck into, so I reckon we should just head on with the first news item of the week. And
cool.
The Book of Boba Fett and the Mandalorian. There will be some similarities. I guess we kind of knew that, but it's always interesting to hear from the cast and what they kind of think is we should expect from it. She's had some interesting comments over the past few weeks, and she kind of identified sort of one aspect that will be different, and that's the sort of relationship dynamic where the Mandalorian very much a sole character, where you're now looking at a team of Boba Fett and Fennec for the Book of Boba Fett. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, obviously she, as every good Star Wars actor says today, you know, they can't really talk about it, but she gives away a little kind of like couple of tidbits about I think. So I'll be interested to see what the difference is. You know, I mean, there's going to be some kind of dynamic difference between, let's say, Grogu and the Mandalorian, and obviously Boba Fett and Fennec. Hopefully, Fennec's probably less of a subordinate and maybe more of a peer, so maybe they're more equal. That would be kind of cool. But I guess it also depends upon how far back the relationship goes as well. I mean, with the emergence of Cad Bane on the Bad Batch, people are starting to talk and hope that maybe Boba Fett will make an appearance on that series. And so maybe we might see some interplay between them right back then. So that would be able to create a really nice, long history between the two. So that would be quite fun.
We're kind of entering into what's traditionally convention season, obviously much reduced with the whole continuing pandemic going on. How do you think they're going to play out the promotion for the Book of Boba Fett? It lands in December. Do you expect to see some previews, maybe some behind the scenes over the next few months of the summer? Or do you think it'll be very much nearer the time as Disney Plus have kind of done so far?
Yeah, I mean, I'd expect to see something over the summer. I mean, obviously now that we know when Star Wars Visions is coming out, which is going to bridge that kind of autumn gap around the end of September, I think that potentially we will see some stuff at San Diego. I think they kind of have to. They've got to tease it a little bit. We have to get some kind of sneak peeks and stuff. It's really the big show of the year, I think. So they need to tease and they need to kind of build up some kind of excitement beyond the fan base.
Yeah. Next up in the news, Tempest Runner, that upcoming audio drama that's part of the High Republic, comes out 31st of August. Dropped a cover, dropped a blurb. Have you dug into the High Republic so far?
Yeah, some. So I'm just starting to read Cameron Scott's second book. Was it The Rise and Storm or something? Rise and Storm. It's right over there. And I've done some other stuff, but I haven't kind of read everything because I don't tend to buy the more junior stuff. I'll go down to YA, but I haven't kind of gone anything below that yet. And so far, it's pretty good. And actually, what's quite nice about Rise and Storm is you're starting to see kind of more connections to kind of references to things that may have happened in the comics and stuff like that. So they're building that connectivity. So they're kind of building that sub-franchise within a franchise, which is what I'm guessing they're really kind of desperate to try and do. Yeah. So actually, an audio book or an audio drama like this is quite fun because the Dooku one and the Afro were both brilliantly produced. So should be really fun to listen to.
Yeah, it's something that it's kind of enriched the sort of Star Wars publishing, I think, in the last few years with the introduction of the dramas, and obviously they follow that up with scripts. So people that aren't in audio dramas can still follow the story further down the line. I've really dug what they've done so far. Cavan's obviously been involved in one already. He's got a long history, especially in sort of Doctor Who franchise. With his work that he's done there in terms of the radio dramas for Who, which are hugely impressive. Great to see him back here, and I'm hoping there's something really cool in store for us here.
Yeah, I mean, and if this is kind of centering around Lorna Dee, who seems to be, one of the more interesting Nihil characters, and she's kind of one of the heads of that organization, and she's kind of quite unique in herself. She's quite narcissistic, I think. So that will be quite interesting just to see that. And again, also there's a lot of characters I've introduced in the High Republic. So actually putting proper voices to some of those characters will be really fun, I think.
Yeah, I think so. More familiar characters or voices involved as Star Wars Detours, the long sort of shelved Star Wars animation project. Seth Green kind of spoke a little bit about it this past week with Entertainment Weekly. He mentioned that he's had recent conversations about it, but there still doesn't seem to be a huge amount of interest from Lucasfilm to put it out there on Disney Plus, and that because of the time it's passed, even if it did get out there, it's going to need some work to bring it back to some kind of relevance and makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, because that's the problem with these kind of shows is that like they're satirical in nature, so therefore a lot of the jokes will probably actually go over like people's heads unless you kind of like really keeping a clean eye on maybe politics and pop culture. But also, I think there's definitely like a trend in the fact that older comedy shows, and actually me and you were talking about this before the show started, some of the jokes, even from films and TV shows that are only a few years old, I don't think you could get away with now. So there could actually be a compliance issue, and maybe Disney and Lucasfilm are like, we don't want to put it out in its true nature just because we could potentially offend some people, and that's the last thing you want to do. So then the question is, do you then do an edit and kind of like sanitize it a little bit, and then kind of maybe miss part of the essence of what it's about? So it's really difficult, I think.
Yeah. Mark Howard's there's asking whether this would go into Legends, and it was it's kind of falls into that kind of weird category of it's not Legends, it's not really a Star Wars story. In effect, it's kind of like parody, kind of.
Yeah, it's a bit like Star Wars Lego, really, isn't it? It's that kind of. It's what they call adjacent to and stuff like that. But I mean, it would be its own thing. I think it would be probably a bit like what we're going to see with Star Wars Visions. It's going to be just its own separate thing, and whatever happens in it, it would happen in it. I mean, did you see the leaked half episode that kind of made its way into Reddit?
I can remember being at Star Wars Celebration, and it was the huge thing that they were pushing. And everywhere you went in Star Wars Celebration, there was little posters and hints towards it. The panel was phenomenal. George was there. Kind of trailed it. And even back then, we were talking about having 39 episodes in the can, and which is, in terms of animation, that's 2 full series.
Yeah.
To be that far ahead before you're planning on bringing it to air is pretty phenomenal, I would have thought. Not an expert in that industry, but I would have presumed that's way, way ahead of where people normally are when they go to launch series.
Oh, massively. Yeah, I mean, you're lucky if you get like your second season greenlit before you've actually kind of like delivered the first season, really. But I suppose again, it might come down to who was paying for it, and if it was George, dropping the dollar, then in that case, it's kind of like he obviously felt confident enough in it, and also maybe confident in Seth Green and Matt Senwright to be able to go, look, let's just do it. And it sounds like from the quote that actually Seth Green kind of talks about, he spent 4 years working with George Lucas. So that in itself is, even though you don't necessarily get to see other people experience your program, you've got a great opportunity that not many people would have had. So, and I guess at the end of the day, those guys would have been paid anyway, regardless. So it's, it's not their fault that it didn't make it to air as such. It's just, the change in direction, as we like to say in the business. So, but do you want to see it? Do you want to see it on Disney Plus, or
it kind of feels to me like just wasted sitting there doing nothing.
Yeah,
But I'm kind of fall into kind of maybe your kind of way of thinking, where you kind of mentioned, is it going to be appropriate for 2021, and sort of how do you handle that? I think people kind of accept a message before something from the 80s or 90s that a warning that it's going to offend or whatever. But if you're putting out something that's never been seen before, does that wash?
Exactly.
It's a difficult one.
Phil's
just mentioned there in the chat that whether it should have came out along the lines of Robot Chicken, not out on Disney Plus, and I think that's a good shout. There's definitely.
I was going to say that. Yeah, I mean, potentially on Star then, because that's kind of what Star is. It's kind of their FX Fox library, isn't it? And that's where you kind of put the stuff that generally is for more mature viewers. So, yeah, I mean, but the problem is you do run a risk that, by its very nature and design, the characters look cute as hell. So therefore, you're going to find kids will probably want to gravitate to it should they kind of catch a whiff of it. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just a case of that we should just all kind of grow thicker skins again and just.
Part of me wonders whether there's a whole load of merch that was made that never ever came out as well.
Oh yeah, exactly, yeah.
But it's I don't know whether it's ever going to air. It kind of feels like it's maybe lost its place now, or the opportunity. And I know Seth made an interesting point. Lucasfilm need to hear that people want to see it. So if people do want to see it, you need to make your voice heard, be loud, let Lucasfilm know that's what you want to see. And I guess the big thing for me is it was making fun of Star Wars, a little bit.
There's a risk.
Whether Disney are a little bit sensitive of, we don't want to mock our own sort of creation because we're trying to build it up with a young audience again, and maybe they feel it becomes too.
Well, but even down to the that Simpsons short, which came out not so long ago. The creators there were told that they're basically not allowed to kind of take the mick on the Mandalorian, which is why you kind of got that kind of baby Maggie kind of Grogu kind of crossover, because that was as close as they got, but they were told that was off limits. So, and I can kind of see that, I can understand back when Disney brought Lucasfilm and they were just about to release Force Awakens, that it would really mix messaging. But, I think now the sequel trilogy is done with, we're kind of into just new eras and eras of Star Wars. So therefore I think maybe it should just come out, with the caveat that, if you watch it, just like as you go into the cave, you take all the kind of baggage with you in there. So therefore, if you're kind of going to get offended, well, then that's kind of down to you.
I guess the last comment on it there, Matt Booker there, our social media guru, George Lucas co-created it, spent 3 years on it, and it's kind of sad that there's Star Wars content out there created by George that hasn't seen the light of day.
Exactly.
That's maybe the harshest part of it.
Yeah. I mean, but it worked for the DC universe. Maybe we just need to start paying for massive billboards down Lucas Avenue and stuff like that, so that we can start to kind of campaign and canvas for bring back Detours or whatever it is, or hashtag Solo 2 and that kind of stuff. And maybe that's
why we put up a big sign saying Detour on it.
Yeah, people get lost.
Anyway, let's move on. Something that we know is definitely happening. Gentle Giant have revealed the new Premier Guild for 21-22. I'm not a huge follower of Gentle Giant's releases, beyond looking with admiration at their stands at celebrations and conventions and thinking that's out of my price range. But this is kind of their membership kind of scheme, and you get various benefits from being at discounts on products and so on. Is basically is what I understand this to be. And alongside that, they announced 4 exclusives, which is kind of your Stormtrooper, kind of one of the sort of Macquarie-esque designs.
Yeah, so Macquarie concept, isn't it? Yeah. So
you've got Ben Kenobi there, which I don't think's a great Ben Kenobi.
Well, I mean, that's an artist impression, isn't it? I mean, I've got the first Ben Kenobi, and it's a slightly similar pose. He's kind of in his robes, so you don't actually get to see his costume, and he's kind of looking a bit kind of thoughtful like that. But I kind of really appreciate the Premier Guild thing. I'm not a member, and I always kick myself because I see all these releases come out, and actually think, well, for $150. You're getting in on the ground floor and you get discounts and stuff. It is actually really worthwhile, because as soon as this stuff hits the secondary market, it's exponentially increases in price. So I don't know. I mean, is that a weak ray or no? That's the So I mean, and those kind of those mini busts I'm really quite fond of. I've got quite a few all over the place. They're quite nice because they're fairly cheap. You spend £100 on them, but they fit into so many different places. And, the jumbo vintage action figures are pretty cool. I've not got into those ones myself just because of the size. And it's I don't think you'd take them off a card. So you're going to need some serious wall space if you actually start collecting all of them.
Yeah,
so,
definitely. And it kind of look, if you go over to fantatracks.com, you can kind of see the benefits of the program, the different levels, platinum, gold, and so on, and what you get, which is, I guess if you're a serious collector of the Gentle Giant range, it's first access to pre-order, which is a huge thing.
Yeah.
As you say, secondary market on these things is astronomical.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I unfortunately I damaged my Wedge Antilles minibus the other day, and I had a look on eBay, and that was like 200 quid. I'm just like, you know, so I'm gutted because it's just a tip of a blaster that's broken off as well. So, you know,
Ross saying there that the Jumbo Han Stormtrooper, that the Hasbro Retro Collection needs that.
yeah, that would be cool. I mean, but I suppose that would, you know, they'd probably do it at a cheaper price point as well. So.
Moving swiftly on, something that'll be in everyone's price range. Lovely little book that's going to be coming out later this year. Edge of Balance, again, part of the Star Wars The High Republic, released a blurb this past week and launches 7th of September. Again, this is taking Star Wars in a new direction, certainly the Eastern market again, trying to tap into that huge audience, which really can be the difference maker between a successful film and a global phenomenon now, really.
Yeah. I mean, we've had some adaptations, haven't we, into kind of like that manga style. We've had Lost Stars, and I think was it The Legends of Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
They've been adapted in that, and they're quite good. So it'd be interesting to see a new novel and like an original like storyline and stuff. And I suppose obviously, of course, ties perfectly into Star Wars Visions. You know, it's like it's all connected, boys and girls. So yeah.
And this is, I think, Viz Media's first step into the High Republic. Obviously, they were announced as one of the smaller publishers that would be involved back at the launch of the series as well. So this is their first foray into it as well. So people will be interested to see what they bring to the table as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I like the design of the character. What's her name? Lily Tora Asai or something.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the fact that she's kind of got two lightsabers which are very, very kind of like samurai sword inspired. So it's, you know, maybe a little bit too on the nose, but hey, it's a striking image, and if that's going to drag people in to pick up the book, that's what you want. So I'll definitely, if I haven't already, I'll definitely be pre-ordering this one.
And talking about the Eastern market, Star Wars Visions. So I got the first tease of it yesterday at Anime Expo. Really unique in look and design from a huge number of Studio 7 animation houses, in fact, going to be contributing to this series. It comes to Disney Plus on 22nd of September. Your first impressions?
Really impressed. Yeah, really. Some of that artwork and, you know, the visuals was stunning. I mean, the thing is, they're kind of throwing the net really wide to try and capture as many different styles and also as many different, I think, audiences as possible. So there's going to be some that may not necessarily appeal to everybody, but in the same way, like, you know, some of the other anime stuff or animation stuff that Lucasfilm has done hasn't, you know, kind of like Galaxy of Adventure and all that kind of stuff, which is kind of, you know, got a specific demographic. This, I think, will kind of be probably a similar demographic, it's just going to be in different styles. So we'll see how this actually all works and stuff. But I'm really excited to see that, again, this isn't canon, so we're not trying to force these creators into fitting into the canon. And actually, to be honest, I agree with Matt. It would be great if we could get, you know, one or two art books, maybe a concept art, and then maybe even like, you know, a frame style book or something, so we can actually get some of these visuals or even posters and stuff like that. Because I'm sure, you know, anime and manga and that kind of stuff, they have a tendency to really go to town with the backgrounds and stuff rather than necessarily the character design. So it will be great just as like, you know, visual styles and stuff. We're
going to be getting the Ronin novel, which is part of the Visions program, not an adaptation, it's an original story, separate from these. So each studio's kind of got its own tale it's going to be telling. I'm not familiar with any of these studios. I'm not going to pretend I'm into anime at all. We were kind of talking before the show. You know, I go to conventions and I see all these people dressed up in this amazing anime cosplays. I haven't got the even slightest foggiest. It's something that's completely passed me by. But you know, from what I've seen from this trailer, it's something I'm going to dig and I'm going to enjoy. Going to be interesting to see if it pulls the anime people back towards Star Wars.
Well, that's it. I mean, because you're not alone there. I mean, as a member of a Rebel Legion and the 501st, we sometimes forget when we go to these conventions that there's other properties outside of Star Wars, and so an anime, especially if you go to like London MCM, is incredibly big. So it'll be interesting to see if we start to see some of these anime characters being represented as cosplayers, because then we're going to start to actually notice whether or not there is a proper kind of like merging of the two different genres and that. So that'll be interesting.
Here's Matt's making an interesting thing there. Watching cartoons, I'm all for watching something that's different. None of this boring date filoni rubbish.
Wow.
To me, it looks different, and so I'm going to give it a try. It's not something I've ever dipped my toe into. Don't think I've seen a single anime episode.
Right.
I've seen clips.
Well, yeah.
So it would be completely fresh for me. So it'd be wrong for me to prejudge it.
Exactly. But also, these are only short, so they're going to be like maybe 10 minutes, maybe. So it's not a big time to spend on them, So just
Mark's
prime.
Having a dig there, and I think the best way is if we throw up the trailer in the background there while we're speaking about it, and anyone that's not seen it can check out what we're kind of talking about. And obviously, if you head over, I guess it's up on StarWars.com now.
StarWars.com, YouTube, and obviously we've got a link on Fan for Track, so
you'll see it on there. You'll get it with the sound and the commentary as well, because it's a behind the scenes. It speaks to the people in the studios as well, so it's interesting to see their influences and what they want to bring to the table as well.
Yeah, I mean, speaking just about the video, it's a nice sizzle. I mean, it's Lucasfilm have got those kind of sizzles right down pat. You speak to the creators and maybe say about, oh my God, it's amazing. I never knew I was going to work on Star Wars, and it's a dream and all that kind of stuff. And but that's what you want. You want to kind of feel like your creatives are being passionate about what they're working on. And that black and white stuff is absolutely freaking amazing. Yeah. That's the one that I'm looking forward to. I think that's the Duel, and that one's about the twins and. And so they deeped into the work. They dipped into the well quite a bit. You've got this Ghibli animation style, which is kind of these kind of super deformed bodies where they've got massive heads and small limbs and stuff like that. And I think that one's meant to kind of be more of a riff on Astro Boy, which is I think like a really popular anime cartoon from like the 1960s and stuff. So
someone with a massive head, Matt Booker there mentioned as good as Family Nest. So I'm all for the Thistle Whistle. And if you've not seen that, Google that, people who watch Family Nest. Highly entertaining animation.
Yeah. Is that? I take it that's not on Disney Plus, is it? I'm still wading my way through like with Gummy Bears, so it's all good. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. It's like we talk about kind of gatekeeping and stuff like that, but sometimes it feels like anime is quite a closed off kind of community, at least, and to get into it, it's quite hard, I think, to just kind of like plunge in. You've got to kind of like know what to look at and consume first, because there's so much of it, and a lot of it is derivative of other animes and stuff like that. I know they had big problems in the early 2000s where they were just running out of ideas of like what to create and reusing stories. So doing Star Wars like this is fantastic. I mean, this stuff, some of these concept arts of those Jedi, they look like they should just be in the High Republic. So, it's all good. I can't wait. And Boba Fett, so.
And Becca made an interesting point there, the art's so stunning, you could almost do it as like a silent anime film. The art tells a story in itself as well. And again, Mark, however, throughout the comment there, if you recall the Galaxy cards, and just allowing the artists to have their own interpretations, letting that freedom, because certainly in the last while, it's kind of felt a little bit like the freedom of the creative has sort of been taken away a little bit, and Disney have had a little bit too much of a hand on things and too much of an oversight, so that little bit of freedom is welcoming, certainly from us from the outside looking in.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's why I'm, excited that they made it very clear that this wasn't meant to be part of canon, so it allows these creatives to basically just go and just, it's blue sky really, isn't it, for them? They can, it gives them the opportunity to do the kind of kind of stories they want to see in Star Wars, and hopefully there's some stuff that will stick. You could easily see all 9 of these short films as basically being like backdoor pilots, easy, and that hopefully is promising, because that means that we're going to have a really diverse storytelling palette going forward, hopefully, assuming it all lands and everybody enjoys it. So
I think with that's the week's news covered, so we can head over to Jabba's court for this week's discussion. So this week, Bad Batch is continuing. We're at episode 10, Common Ground. I've lost my background again.
You're green.
Happens every week, and I don't know why it's happening. Technical bugs. It was working before the show. Yeah. The whole illusion of me being in Tatooine's just been lost once again. There's
another brick in the wall.
There's Tatooine. There we go. It's just, I'm back. Time traveling. It's like an anime concept, isn't it? I can project myself into other locations. Anyway, talking about green things, Jabba. We're in Jabba's court. This week's discussion. Episode 10, Bad Batch. First impressions overall.
First impressions, I felt this was the closest we've got to a proper A-Team kind of episode. You've got the guys by themselves. They've left a kid at home, and they're just out there just to rescue a poor senator, and then bring him back into the world. So that is like a very grand overview of it. But as I think people are going to probably talk about in the comments, there's more to this episode than I think meets the eye. But some real stunning visuals in this. I liked the fact that they used a ATTF chase. So rather than having these super high speed fast speeder bike chases, they have these 2 lumbering kind of machines trying to chase each other, and that was quite fun in itself. And the city of Raxus looked amazing. I actually thought, because I think it was in the tease that they released last week, I almost thought it was Naboo, to be fair. So but yeah, underage gambling, we'll let that one slide, because to be fair, Omega does do a big solid for the crew at the end of the day. She sees the opportunity, and she capitalizes, I think, on Sid to basically clear the guy's debt. So, I think if the guys kind of owe her one, to be fair. But
Matt also threw out the comment there that Bad Batch meh, which I'm kind of hearing slightly a bit more and more, where people are kind of a little bit underwhelmed by the series. It's not having that seismic impact that Star Wars animation has in the past. Really, it's not. It feels like there's a lot of non-consequential elements to it.
Yes and no. There's a part of me that thinks that kind of the Bad Batch is like a vehicle in which we're going to see bits and bobs and kind of tie up loose ends. I feel like we don't necessarily need all the big revelations, and the thing is, if we get these big revelations week in, week out, we get used to it, and then when it doesn't happen, it's suddenly a filler episode and stuff like that. Where actually we've got to take a step back, and we've got to look at the series as a whole. And so far we've had Rex kind of come into it, Cutler Quain. We've had Fennec, and I know everybody kind of thinks that they're using that to kind of offset the fact that the other main cast of characters aren't that interesting. But I kind of think that we get to experience that very early Galactic Empire period.
I was going to say, it's got the same problem as the Clone Wars had in its early seasons, in that it maybe doesn't work as an episodic series, but the greater collective maybe works better.
No, to be honest, I think the week in, week out episode works, and I've really enjoyed how they've pretty much ended most episodes and then picked up almost where they left off in the previous week. So it's quite interesting, because Disney followed this single episode per week kind of philosophy, but it kind of does slightly kind of maybe lend itself to maybe a big binge at the end of the season and kind of watch all of it and just to see how it flows. but I'm enjoying it. I think it's quite fun. And I don't always necessarily need like the big reveals every week for for Star Wars, because like I said, I think if we can get some kind of like decent peril going and some interesting arcs, like Mark's kind of saying, then I think we're going to get kind of like somewhere. I think we had the establishment of the relationships in the first half of the season, and the second half, I think, which we're going to get to probably from next week onwards, is possibly be where things are going to kind of set up, because you can't really get the emotional response that you want from the audience unless they care about the characters, and I think if you don't spend time with them, you're not gonna give a toss, really. If suddenly Hunter kind of like gets shot in the second episode, you'll be like, well, that's all right, because he's going to be all right because he's one of the main characters. Now, actually, genuinely, when he got taken down by Cad Bane, I think there was a point where we're like, oh, has he actually could he have properly died? Which would have been really exciting. So, and they seem to be getting some really good voice talent in. This week they've got Alexander Siddig from Deep Space Nine, Dr. Julian Bashir, so he plays the senator. So that was quite cool. And even the droid, the woman who plays the droid, I think it's Sean Campbell or something. Mark Newbold will tell me if I'm wrong, but she was pretty cool. Wasn't too kind of like sassy or anything like that. Wasn't like a narky droid, just quite a decent kind of like character to kind of lead them around about. So I thought it was all right. Yeah.
Are we underestimating Omega?
Yeah, Omega's heightened perception shines through. Yeah, no, to be fair, I'm with Rebecca. I think there's something special about her, but I don't know what it is. And we, me and Mark talk about this in this week's Making Tracks, actually where she could be. And in fact, Rebecca sent us a really good question last week or the week before, kind of saying, could we see Omega in the book of Boba Fett? And I think there's a really strong possibility that we could. Just partly because I think, again, you're not just going to set up these main characters that are going to just be used for one series. They're going to now start to be, seen in different shows. We've seen Fennec Shand in the Bad Batch, and that's a completely different end of the time zone to the Mandalorian. So it's it's interesting. I think you would be quite happy, Brian, because the droids are getting better. They're not getting
I was going to ignore this comment because for my love of droids,
Yeah. No, I mean, but the thing is, even droids need to kind of they need to evolve a little bit from a Star Wars perspective. I know they've got to be able to kind of develop beyond their programming, for lack of a better term. So, yeah.
Here's a question then. Omega is the end of the Greek alphabet, beginning of the Greek alphabet. Alpha. Are we going to meet Alpha?
Are we going to meet Boba Fett? I think so, possibly, maybe. I think, like I said earlier on, we had Cad Bane being introduced, and he's got the head plate from potentially, I guess, where he got shot by Boba. So everything's kind of maybe aligning a little bit, and I think it would be quite interesting. It would be an interesting scene to see brother and sister kind of reunited, So. Boba Fett, as Mr. Newbold says, the king of puns as always. So, but yeah, why not? I mean, I think we haven't seen Boba for a long time in the Star Wars animation. So therefore, I think he's well high and due for a return, basically.
And it's, Dave Filoni's not showrunner on this one, but he's kind of overarching seeing it. And if there's anyone that likes to bring characters back in a full circle, it's kind of Dave Filoni.
Well, exactly. And I also think now that we've got Fennec Shand and we kind of really see that she's kind of like a good guy kind of character, rather than necessarily a bounty hunter for hire, and that I think it would be great to see that maybe that initial relationship where they first meet. It'd be interesting to see how that happens, and see how that transpires, rather than maybe rely on either flashbacks or inferences in the book of Boba Fett. Let's see it in the Bad Batch and see how that all kind of goes down.
Yeah. Do you think we can expect to see Omega in the book of Boba Fett? Do you think that is it perhaps too early for season 1? Do you think it could happen down the line?
Well, so I mean, what I kind of said when actually Becca asked this question a couple of weeks ago in episode 96, 97 of Making Tracks. You have to go and have a listen if you haven't already. I think potentially that it might be too early for her to kind of be moved into the live action. I don't know if she's kind of got enough kind of goodwill, as it were, and she's well known enough by the general fan base. Because then also you're going to have some kind of explanation, which is going to have to happen, exposition in the Book of Boba Fett. But I guess it depends how many seasons this runs for. I mean, you think about how long it's taken people to really kind of push Ahsoka to become a live action character and stuff. So, I had an interesting theory, and I'd be interested to hear what the collective kind of thinks in the chat. But we talked about this earlier today, and I thought it might be quite fun if actually Omega becomes Rey's mum. So there you go. Yeah, I thought you were going to say that. But I think with a character like that, she's got a lot of potential because we don't necessarily know where she's headed. She's obviously great at Djarik, so she could easily make her money there. But what happens then once she gets separated from the Bad Batch? Is she naive enough to be able to survive, in the galaxy by herself and grow up? So
I'm going to ask a stupid question.
I'm
going to ask it anyway. Can clones give natural birth to a child?
Don't know. That's just it. We don't know. I mean, you wonder potentially how much you think about, like, when if you're trying to kind of create a perfect soldier, what kind of like levels of redundancy you keep. Obviously there's some kind of stuff that you probably don't want them to focus on, and probably women is one of them. But obviously, you look at Cutler Quain, he ends up with like a hot Twi'lek wife, so obviously there's something there. It's not like they're kind of like, they're castrated or anything like that. So
I was going to go there.
Well, there you go.
I'm kind of thinking back to Heir of the Empire novel, where the clones were kind of outside of the Force a little bit. And I just wondered, does that play into the whole arc with Rey? But
possibly. I mean, my thinking was, which I kind of assume anyway, that Rey gets her innate Force abilities from her dad, from the Palpatine side. But the fact that actually she's quite good with technology and she's quite, good at being scavenging and stuff like that, that might just be something that she gets from her mother's side. So that was my kind of thing. Because the other thing was, like, I saw memes and stuff floating around this week of people comparing Omega to Gwendolyn Christie as Captain Phasma. But I think the timeline doesn't quite work in terms of ages for that. But otherwise, that would have been quite an interesting shout. But we also have a book about where Captain Phasma comes from. So that's kind of like a bit of a moot point anyway. So I don't know why I bring it up.
Yeah. Are we perhaps maybe looking too much into this, trying to create crossovers that maybe aren't going to be there? As well, that maybe there is no super plan beyond the Bad Batch for Omega.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, the thing is, they can have quite a nice end to the Bad Batch, whatever that is, whether they walk into a sunset or half of them get blown up or whatever, But the thing is, just because they don't necessarily have a resolution or a connection now, doesn't mean they can't retrofit one later on. Yeah. So therefore, it's a whole thing, right? If you kind of like, if you kill off a character, then you don't know how that could maybe be brought back in at a later date. And they don't like to really kill characters off and then bring them back, unless they're like a Sith or like an Emperor or something like that. So it would be, I think maybe they could either keep her and just see where it goes, because it could be that there's another animated series with her name on it and she could be running like a rebel self, or she's going to have a training by the Bad Batch by the end of this, I think. So why not put her to good use?
Yeah. And after the end of this episode, where do you think it's going to go for episode 11? Any thoughts or theories?
Well, I mean, I kind of thought that basically they're gonna square their debt with Sid and then kind of like part company, because at least at the beginning part of the season, it felt like, you know, she was just on the take and she was going to just screw them over. But they've become wise to it, and I think also Amiga's kind of had a pronounced kind of effect on Sid, and I think she's now quite fond of her, so probably doesn't actually want her to kind of come into any harm. So maybe it becomes more of a mutual kind of thing. I think possibly the whole kind of like theory of her, but the whole kind of like idea of her giving the Bad Batch missions on a weekly basis is quite a clean and tidy thing to do. It's quite easy to kind of do that, and then that's a good jumping off point for then the next few episodes. But, you know, we still need to see what happens with Crosshair, and I think we also guess we're going to run back into Cad Bane because he's still on the hunt for her. So she's not out of danger by any stretch of imagination.
Yeah. And I think that's a good place to wrap up this week's show. Thanks for joining me. Look forward to hearing more from you on making tracks during the week, even though Mr. Newbald's there as well. And,
yeah, well, that can't be helped, I'm afraid.
Can't be helped. And thanks to everyone and for the contributions to the show. If you're watching this on repeat, join us live next time. Be part of the show yourself. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Keep up to date with the latest Star Wars news each and every day on FanthaTracks.com. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Tumblr, and Pinterest at FanthaTracks. And be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and follow FanthaTracks TV to be alerted to new content and be a part of our live show.